Hello, my name is Animesh. I am a senior lecturer at Murdoch University, and I came with 30 students to visit this village. And I guess my students loved this village. They learned so many things regarding sustainability, how to conserve forests, how to conserve resources. So it was a great learning experience for our students, and I believe this learning they can gather it from here, and they can transfer this knowledge to Australia how to conserve resources. So yeah, I believe this 2 weeks program in first in IPB and then in Udayana University is wonderful, and our students learned a lot. Yeah, thank you so much.
In a world driven by the relentless quest for progress, managing our natural resources has become essential, not just as a policy issue, but as a matter of survival for communities, ecosystems, and economies. This documentary invites you on a journey to explore the tragedy of the commons in Western countries, particularly in Australia, while highlighting an innovative approach to resource management through Indonesia's polycentric governance model. Let's delve into Indonesia's unique governance system. Since the early 2000s, Indonesia has embarked on a transformative journey towards decentralized governance designed to empower local governments. However, this shift has often resulted in a tangled web of confusion and discord among various authorities. Each local government has taken charge of different policies, leading to a significant challenge in coordinating effective resource management. With every region adhering to its own values and priorities, collaboration and decision-making have become increasingly complicated. Consequently, the enforcement of regulations has been inconsistent, complicating sustainable management of natural resources. This lack of cohesion stifles the development of viable solutions for both communities and the environment, impacting everyone involved. To address the overuse and degradation of shared resources, Nobel Prize winner Elinor Ostrom introduced a groundbreaking framework called the Institutional Analysis and Development Framework, or the IAD. Visualize this. As individuals engage with one another, a rich narrative unfolds about how shared resources are managed. The IAD framework delves into the dynamics of these interactions, focusing on the individuals and groups involved, the decisions they make, and the diverse environments in which they operate. It helps unravel the intricate web of rules governing our interactions with common resources, illustrating how each decision influences subsequent actions within a broader context. What is particularly exciting about the IAD framework is its versatility. It can be applied across various settings, whether in markets, businesses, families, community groups, legislative bodies, or government agencies, providing a common language for scholars to compare and discuss diverse theories. The framework examines several factors that influence how people interact and make decisions regarding shared resources. It takes into account external factors like the physical environment, community characteristics, and existing regulations, the specific context in which interactions occur, how these external factors shape behaviour and patterns, the standards used to evaluate processes and outcomes, and the ultimate outcomes of these interactions. In essence, the IAD framework equips us with the tools to untangle the intricate factors influencing how communities manage shared resources. This understanding may pave the way for improved resource management, not just in Australia, but across the globe. A vivid illustration of the tragedy of the commons can be found in the Great Barrier Reef, a breathtaking gem of Australia. This natural wonder, alive with colour and biodiversity, now faces urgent threats from climate change. As ocean temperatures rise and water quality declines, the delicate equilibrium of this shared ecosystem hangs in the balance. Disturbingly, human activities, particularly overfishing, are pushing the reef to the brink, as many prioritise short-term gains over the long-term health of this invaluable habitat. We are witnessing a troubling increase in coral bleaching events, where once vibrant corals are rendered stark and lifeless. This shift echoes the insightful warnings of Hardin, illustrating how the cumulative impact of individual choices can lead to the degradation of resources that belong to all. It is a pressing call to action, urging us to protect not only the reef, but also the future of our planet.
What are the main benefits of polycentric governance, particularly in the context of managing natural resources?
Polycentric governance is highly effective in terms of managing the
adaptive way of management. So if there is any surprise, how based on that surprise, how we can manage the resources. So that is the main benefits for adaptiveness of any unexpected events or unexpected situation, and polycentric governance handle that. Second thing, you can have like equity and power distributions plays an important role, and resource is not evenly distributed among different people, and in this case the participation and inclusiveness ensures the effective resource distribution on equity basis. So these two things, but also there are many other benefits. So just I mentioned these two important benefits that polycentric governance can ensure.
Tenganan Village, located in eastern Bali, is one of Indonesia's oldest traditional communities. It serves as a primary example of how local governance can effectively manage resources, particularly forests, through a collaborative approach. In Tenganan, the community has maintained its unique ways of self-governance and care for the environment. They follow customary laws that blend ecological, cultural, and spiritual perspectives. This harmony between tradition and nature allows the villagers to manage their forests sustainably. This overview looks at how Tenganan's governance model not only supports flexible resource management, but also highlights the challenges it encounters and what it means for sustainable resource practices throughout Indonesia.
We were able to chat with Michaela to get her insight on Tenganan Village after her personal experiences with speaking to local villagers. Now, Michaela, how is the Tenganan Village structured?
We learnt that Tenganan manages its forests at various levels within the community. So at local levels, the villagers collectively decide how to use and protect their forests based on their customary laws. They call these the Awig laws. And traditional leadership of the village is embodied by a local chief that plays a key role in resolving disputes and upholding community norms.
This collaborative governance structure allows for adaptive decision-making, promoting resilience and long-term management. Tenganan's forest governance can be understood through a simplified IAD framework that looks at how the community organises itself. Villagers interact with their customary laws to make collective decisions about the forest. They have established rules that define who can access forest resources and how they can be used. For example, there are specific guidelines on collecting fallen fruit or cutting down dead trees. Knowledge about the state of the forest and its regulations is shared among villagers to ensure everyone is informed, and there are non-traditional penalties for anyone who breaks the rules.
And Michaela, how does the Tenganan Village interact with the government?
We learnt that the Tenganan forest is a customary village, so this means they function under customary laws and don't really have much interaction with the government. The interaction they do have is when the government provides funding as an incentive for the village to continue environmental conservation, but that's really about it.
If there is little to no interaction with the government, how do they enforce their rules and beliefs?
So in the village, people make decisions together through open conversation. This is a key part of the system and is based on Tri Hitakarana beliefs, which is the harmony between people, religion and nature. So when there's a problem, the village leader is informed and holds a meeting to discuss it. We were told that the leader's role here is to guide a talk between everyone involved to find a solution together. Also, if someone's found to have done something wrong, there are certain consequences. So, for example, if someone cuts down a tree without permission, they have to return the tree and pay a fine that's double the value of the wood that they took. In some cases, they might need to leave the village, although Suamba stressed that this has never happened, and I think it's probably because of the belief system that I mentioned before.
Tenganan's location between hills makes it vulnerable to natural disasters, influencing their forest practices to prevent soil erosion. The village's strong cultural and religious ties, along with their understanding of local myths and history, significantly shape how they approach forest conservation.
And what are some of the challenges faced by the village and the forest?
Yeah, so there are quite a few challenges, particularly at the moment with growing tourism and development. So when more tourists visit, the culture of the village is at risk.
Globalization and the rapid rise in tourism can dilute traditional values and customs of the village, and the expansion of tourism also creates issues with accessibility and connectivity, interfering with sacred community spaces. Another thing with tourism is that developers want to make room for tourist amenities. So forests are being cut down for things like parking lots and resorts. This obviously damages the natural environment. Unfortunately, this growth in tourism also affects agricultural lands, like in Bali, which loses about 1,000 hectares of farmland each year. This obviously threatens local food production and livelihoods. The list of challenges goes on. The more visitors to an area, the more traffic jams, pollution, and overcrowding. So, as you can see, unregulated development puts a huge amount of strain on essential resources like the water in Subaks, and can even put the village's ecological balance at risk.
The effectiveness of Tanginan's forest management can be evaluated by its ecological sustainability, seen in the preservation of tree species such as jackfruit and candlenut, the economic advantages, seen in the sustainable use of forest resources to support local livelihoods, the conservation of cultural values, seen in the maintenance of traditions that reinforce environmental stewardship, and the reduction of risk, seen in its ability to mitigate soil erosion and landslides. By examining Tanginan's approach, we can gain insights into how community-based governance can effectively achieve sustainable resource management, blending traditional practices with environmental goals for the future.
Balinese people work hard to tend and care for the Subak system, self-governing their water management for agricultural use in a traditional way that has been preserved for centuries. As of 2017, over 1,200 Subaks are still around, each other reflecting religious and philosophical concepts of the Tri Hita Quran, bringing together the spiritual, natural, and human elements of this world. This philosophy, born from a cultural exchange between Bali and India over 2,000 years ago, has shaped the Subak water system. The Subak system was developed to serve small-scale rice farmers, enabling them to cultivate terraced paddies on Bali's volcanic slopes. The Subak landscape is characterized by forests that protect and funnel water slopes, terraced rice paddies that contour the hillsides, and networks of canals, tunnels, and weirs that distribute water, and temples that mark water sources and key points along the irrigation route, reflecting the spiritual dimension of water management. Each Subak manages water from a single source, with groups ranging from 50 to 400 farmers. The system's design requires farmers to synchronize planting and fallow periods, which not only optimizes water use but also serves as a natural pest control mechanism.
We were fortunate enough to be able to meet and speak with Dr. Stephen Lansing, who has extensively studied the human-environmental interactions in Bali, being able to get his insight into the Subak through his knowledge and work with the practices over the years. He's written many articles on the Subak and has even been able to directly work with the farmers to understand the intricacies of their traditional farming ways. Can you explain how the Subak system is structured and what makes it unique?
Well, the Subak system, we think it's about 1,000 years old. There are inscriptions in Balinese language, royal inscriptions that refer to irrigation tunnel builders from 896 AD. So Subaks begin to appear in the records around the 11th century. So it's been around for a long time. They are small-scale, face-to-face communities of farmers who share water from a common source. And they manage the water source as what we now call a common resource. So if you want to grow rice, you need to belong to a Subak, and you cooperate with your fellow farmers in managing the water. And that includes not only deciding when it goes where, but also offering tokens of thanks, basically performing rituals to the goddesses who have to do with the flow of water into their fields. Because as they say, without the gods and goddesses, fields dry up. So it's a system of managing a cooperative system for managing irrigation. It's a little more complicated because Subaks tend to be quite small, maybe 50 hectares or so, sometimes a little larger. But there are lots and lots of them as you go down the slopes of a Balinese volcano. So they need to coordinate with each other. if you could kind of imagine the dendritic patterns, like, networks of subocs obtaining water from many small sources of water. And what the upstream farmers decide to do with water affects what happens to the downstream farmers. So in addition to managing their own suboc, they also elect a leader, and the leaders get together and they decide how to fairly adjust and manage the irrigation patterns so that everybody gets the water that they need at the right time. Doesn't always work. Sometimes there are problems, but by and large, after they find solutions to those problems because it's everybody's income. It's vital to their well-being. So they find solutions. So in brief, that's a suboc system.
The organisational structure of the subac community is split between administration and members. The foundation begins stemming from the TEMPEC, with subac members that each have a group head. Working our way up into the administration, it is made up of work groups, a secretary, a treasurer, and the person responsible for the channel of information, who are all instructed or guided by the administration heads, the deputy head, and the subac head. When multiple subac heads come together to discuss the division of water between subacs from the river or stream, they have a meeting called the Paruman Krama Subac. All of this following a set of rules called the Awig Awig, which outlines punishments and informal rules that govern the subacs.
How has being a part of a polycentric governance system influenced the subacs? Have these influences been largely beneficial, or have there been challenges?
Well, there was a kind of an experiment on this in the late 70s when something called the Green Revolution, it was introduced in many parts of the world, including Indonesia and Bali. The Green Revolution provided new hybrid varieties of rice, and in Bali, the government urged farmers to grow rice as fast as possible and to set aside the traditional irrigation patterns managed by the subocs because they wanted to grow as much rice as they could. Indonesia was sort of suffering they needed to grow more rice. So they tried that experiment, and for a year or so it worked, but then it failed miserably because water sharing became chaotic. And as rice grew in little bits of patches all over, rice pests began to find that food, and their numbers multiplied. So pretty soon you had explosions of rice pests. Farmers had to figure out what to do. And so the government said, well, use pesticides. So they tried pesticides. That, however, was not very successful. They had to keep ramping up the quantities and the ranges of areas that were hit with the pesticides, until finally, I have one of my earlier films, on camera, I have the head of the local suboc saying, and we thought to ourselves, why have we abandoned a system that is already good? So they went back to scheduling water so that they could schedule, if a large enough area plants at the same time, then a few months later, it'll harvest at the same time. The fields can be flooded, and there's nothing much left for the pests to eat. So in this way, you can bring down the pests, provided you have a large enough fallow period. To do that, you need a polycentric system. You need to be able to coordinate the irrigation pattern with your neighbors. But they already had polycentric system. They've been using this in the past. So they'd simply meet and decide, how can we allocate the water so as to get enough water to everybody, but also have a coordinated fallow period at the same time. And within a few years, things sort of went back to normal. So polycentric system keeps proving its worth. I mean, without it, they will have problems either with pests or water shortages. We've done simulations with computer models just to look at how that would happen, and they have to continually co-adapt to each other. There's no downside to that other than the fact that they need to share water, but they can't grow rice on these hillsides without sharing the water, without having some kind of effective system of adaptation. They can react to changes in climate, react from week to week to the water supply, which is going to vary. It's not fixed from the beginning, right? There's no dam that turns on a spigot. It's just what comes down over the fields.
Within each subac, stakeholders play distinct but interconnected roles. Farmers, who are the core members, are responsible for cultivating rice and participating in collective decisions. Workgroups specialise in different aspects, such as temple maintenance or water distribution. Landowners, who may be represented by others if not directly involved in farming. And community leaders and government who support coordination and conflict resolution.
What are the key roles played by different stakeholders within the Subak system?
They enforce equality. Everybody, the Balinese live in a world of caste. They're high and low castes, and they live in a world of differences in wealth. But in the Subak, everybody gets a voice. They speak to each other in the register of Balinese that is polite to everybody. They don't assert status claims, in other words. And if people violate those rules, then they can be fined. The Subak can say, you're not obeying like an equal partner, and so we're going to fine you. The worst that can happen is they say, okay, we're cutting off your water for a while until you learn to cooperate with us. So I would say that's not just the story that they tell to investigators. I've watched it for years. It really happens. They really do enforce these rules of equal say, and that includes. Some people own a lot of rice. Other people, rice terraces. Other people are sharecroppers. They're often very poor, but in the Subak meetings, they're equal.
Despite its strengths, the Subak irrigation system faces significant challenges. Urbanisation and tourism poses a threat due to encroachment on agricultural land and water sources. Infrastructure development leads to roads and tourism projects causing conflict with Subak priorities. Changing agricultural practices such as the Green Revolution introduced new rice varieties and chemical inputs, disrupting traditional cycles and sometimes undermining collective management. The collapse rate shows a steady decline in Subaks due to previously mentioned pressures.
Based on your experience working with Subaks, what are the biggest challenges they face as a decentralized governing body in Indonesia?
The problem is the massive increases in tourism have led to the expansion of the World Bank plans. I should say World Bank plans for tourism initially imagined that it would be restricted to a few areas, but that has not happened. So very large areas of Bali, people sell their land. And if you sell rice lands, rice fields, the problem is that and allow a restaurant or a villa or something like that to be built, then the taxes go up on that land because of its value, not only in that piece of land with the restaurant on it, but also on the land of the neighbors. So the tourism has caused massive disruptions and changes in the Subaks, very hard because of the encroaching tourist developments, and also because the tourists take a lot of water, right? The water is siphoned off for the use of the tourist industry. So the Subaks have been collapsing now for the last 15 years or so at a fairly high rate. I forget what the numbers are, but they simply can no longer stay in business. In West Bali, maybe you've seen, you see these out in rice paddies, you see these strange looking villas, they call them, built by foreigners, which disrupt the Subak. So that's been it's a major threat to the continued existence of the Subak. And it's kind of ironic because people go to Bali because of the beauty of the Subaks and the rice terraces. But by putting a house in the middle of it, you sort of spoil the view.
Subak is underpinned by the philosophy of Trihita Karan, the three causes of well-being: harmony with God, with people, and with nature. Rituals, temple festivals, and local knowledge are integral to water management, pest control, and social cohesion. This blend of practical and spiritual knowledge is a key reason for Subak's resilience and adaptability. Using Eleanor Ostrom's institutional analysis and development framework, Subak's success can be attributed to clearly defined boundaries, collective choice managements, monitoring and graduated sanctions, conflict resolution mechanisms, and the recognition of rights to organise. There is growing interest in whether Subak's model could be adapted to other contexts, such as water management in Western countries.
Do you think this model of governance could be successfully implemented in Western countries? Why or why not?
There's a wonderful book called Governing the Commons by Elinor Ostrom. It's sort of the classic that got her a Nobel Prize for economics and studying these systems. They have to be bottom up, and they have to be based upon consensus management. There are lots of them. They're famous all over the world. In Spain, I mean, Elinor Ostrom has many examples of functioning systems of commons management. So we know they work. I could, many examples. New Mexico, where I spend a lot of time, there's something called acequias. These are the traditional systems going back to Spanish times of water management, much like the SUBACs. So those simply have to coexist, and often they cross the borders of counties or of states or of, they're to the extent that they can be allowed to manage themselves with the government simply taxing the proceeds and providing resources, then they'll work fine. If, however, the commons is not supported and it's sort of every man for himself, then that tends to produce problems with ecological problems, with the management of things like water. Water doesn't stay put to be managed. It requires consensual management, in my opinion.
What do you kind of mean by like consensual management?
I mean, the groups of people who are the water users, need to have some sort of an association in which they can decide upon how the water will be channeled, how it will be managed. The water users, because the water users are the ones who can respond to changing environmental conditions and take maximum advantage. There is an example in Sri Lanka where World Bank built, or rather the Asian Development Bank built a new irrigation systems, great big massive project. And then they provided instructions for the farmers as to how the water should be used. The problem is that there's something called the tail ender problem. The irrigators at the tail end of an irrigation system take what they can get, right? They get whatever is released by the next group up. So if that doesn't work very well, they may not be able to function, whereupon the next group up becomes the tail enders. And if it fails again, it can kind of daisy chain on up so that the whole thing falls apart because there's no effective management system. Top-down management really doesn't work very well for agricultural irrigation systems.
How do you think polycentric governance would function in a country like Australia?
Yeah, so as you have seen, Australian governance system already kind of polycentric because it's federal governance system. That means we have the federal government, we have the state. In a state, we have the local councils. So, and of course, the decision-making body are kind of independent, but then interrelated. So already we have this kind of polycentric governance system in place. And apart from this existing infrastructure or existing institutional structure, we have also like local problems, for example, Aboriginal natural resource management issues. And in that case, of course, we do have the Aboriginal councils. And so they also organize the things and resolve the issues interacting with the other decision-making bodies. So, of course, in Australia also this polycentric governance plays an important role. Yeah.
Well, on the surface, the Subiac irrigation system and the Tenganan forest seem completely different. But when you dig a little deeper, you see they share many similarities when it comes to sustainable management.
Both Tenganan and Subiac are incredible examples of community-based resource management. They are non-government run organisations. They are run by the people that use and depend on the resources, farmers in Subiac and villagers in Tenganan. They are both rooted in Balinese culture and spirituality, the Subiac dividing water equally, and it's tied to the belief that God gave them water as a gift. Tenganan, similarly, they have protected areas, not only for environmental protection, but also for spiritual connection.
Both of them are decentralised governments. There's not just one single authority figure. Instead, it's the whole community, where there's decisions on how much water to siphon, when to plant rice, or what to do with community land. It all comes down to what the whole community thinks. These do not come without their difficulties. In the Subiac, they face constant pressure from tourism, with villas and hotels being built right on the edges of their land. These then siphon off their own water, all while polluting them. For the Tenganan forest, on the other hand, there's much pressure from state forestry laws, with sometimes the conservation plans made to protect them not accounting for their customary laws and impacting them.
Outside recognition is another big difference. Subak has a designation as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, giving it a certain protection of rights. However, Tenganan does not have this kind of protection. This means it is more vulnerable when laws do not align with traditional values.
Lastly, their punishments are quite different. The Subaks focus more on social punishment, whether it being a small coin or some rice from their overall yield. They don't want to really punish the person, only to encourage cooperation. On the other hand, the Tenganan forests are much more serious, with the most extreme cases seeing exclusion from the village.
Applying Ostrom's principles, we can see the relationship between the actors of community and government working together for a collective benefit under informal law. Both communities know exactly who's involved and what areas or resources they are responsible for, which is key in avoiding conflicts.
Both systems are based on collective management, not top-down orders. This means that people will be more inclined to follow the rules as they help to make them. The monitoring isn't about policing, it's about community watch. These people know how to act because they live it every day. They've got eyes on the ground and norms to follow to keep in check.
They have inbuilt ways to solve problems. Whether it's conflict or misunderstanding, they handle it internally. Whether it's a Subak meeting or a Tenganan village council, disputes are resolved quickly and in a way that makes sense for the community. Support from government, but only if it respects the local system. Subak benefits from national and international recognition, Tenganan not so much. The takeaway being that external support can be great, but only if it respects and reinforces, not replaces local governance.
What can Indonesia and the rest of the world learn from these systems? In the context of Indonesia, the two case studies have shown that customary systems work, and they have worked for hundreds of years. The government should legally recognise and support them, rather than trying to impose outside models that may not fit. Culture isn't a barrier, it's an asset. These systems thrive because they've woven into the cultural and spiritual life of the people, and protecting these traditions isn't just about heritage, it's about sustainability. Helping where it counts is important, such as providing technical help, legal backing, and further funding without taking over. Local communities know what they're doing. They just need a bit more support in today's fast-changing world.
In global context, the two case studies indicate that a new perspective could be brought to Western governance with the polycentric management of resources. These Balinese examples show that local, culturally grounded systems can manage resources better than many formal institutions. Adaptability is incredibly important, with both the Subak and Tenganan being flexible and capable of adjusting to changes in the environment and society, which is something rigid systems struggle with. But with a strong sense of community, a resilient, well-preserved system can be put in place by individuals to take care of themselves and their commons.
The Subak and Tenganan have proved that community-led, culturally rooted systems are smart, sustainable, and incredibly resilient. By using the IAD framework to unpack how they work, we can see why they're so successful and applies those lessons elsewhere. Whether you're in Indonesia or a Western country, the message is simple. Where community leads, resources thrive.